Part 17. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Ju Yi. Chapter 161. He wanted to know, but no one would tell him the answer because he was not qualified to know. He could only accept this unfamiliar title, and changed it under the watchful eyes of Lu Changxiao and others. His Adam's apple rolled, and with a forced smile on his face, he asked, "Classmate Wei, how was your year?" Wei Yuxian said politely, "It's pretty good." Classmate Cheng seems to be doing well too. Cheng Jinjiao laughed twice, not knowing what to say. Obviously during class, he was full of questions to ask her, but now, he couldn't ask her a single word. In fact, he also vaguely knew some facts, such as why Ding Nana targeted Wei Yuxian in the first place. It was precisely because Ding Nana liked him and he liked Wei Yuxian that she was hurt so much. He was also the one who indirectly hurt Yuxian. Therefore, it is normal for Yuxian to keep her distance from him now. He originally had some hope that he could maintain his previous relationship with Yuxian, but now it seems that it is impossible. He was immersed in his own world. He didn't know how long it took, but Wei Yuxian reminded him that he came back to his senses. Wei Yuxian said, "Classmate Cheng, class is about to begin, please go back quickly." Cheng Jinjiao couldn't say a word except okay. He returned to his seat in despair. His roommate looked at him and asked, "Do you still like Wei Yuxian?" Cheng Jinjiao looked at him with a wry smile, as if to say, "What do you think?" The roommate took a breath and said, "How dare you like Wei Yuxian? Do you know who Wei Yuxian is now?" Cheng Jinjiao said he didn't know and asked, "What is her status now? Why don't I dare to like her? I just like her." The roommate patted his shoulder and said, "Then you are pretty awesome. Wei Yuxian is different now from before. She is now Master Xian's fiancée. Do you know why she took a year off from school? Because she was pregnant and gave birth to 2 heirs for Master Xian." When Cheng Jinjiao heard the news, his mind exploded. Unbelievable. Master Xian. As a native of Kyoto, of course he knew who Master Xian was. That person who makes the whole of Kyoto fearful. Yuxian is actually his fiancée. She even had a child with him. His breathing was a little short, and he couldn't believe it. He turned to look at Wei Yuxian behind him, then turned his head back and asked his roommate, "Are you lying to me? How could Yuxian be related to Master Xian?" His roommate knew that he wouldn't believe it, so he took out his phone, found the original news and put it in front of him. It was the news from the day of Shishi and Zizi's 100-day banquet. He said, "See for yourself, I didn't lie to you." What the news said, Master Xian also admitted it himself. Cheng Jinjiao took the phone over with trembling hands and looked at it all the way. If you don't believe it, you have to believe it. Regarding the news about Master Xian, those newspapers would not dare to write random information. Without Master Xian's instruction, they would not dare to publish these things. Therefore, everything is true. Yuxian is really Master Xian's fiancée, and she has 2 children with Master Xian. Putting down his phone, Cheng Jinjiao took a deep breath and figured out why Wei Yuxian had just kept a distance from him. According to Master Xian's temperament, how could he be willing to let his woman get too close to other men? It is really impossible for him and Yuxian. There was no hope at all. His family has a little money, but compared to Master Xian, it is as dust. He didn't dare to compete with Master Xian, so he could only kill the love in his heart. In the classroom, many people were paying attention to the conversation between Wei Yuxian and Cheng Jinjiao just now, because this was the first person who dared to take the initiative to talk to Wei Yuxian. Of course they pay special attention. When everyone saw Cheng Jinjiao walking back to his seat with a look of despair, they all took a deep breath. I thought that Wei Yuxian had indeed become different. After becoming the wife of a wealthy family, even her former friends didn't look down upon her. Then how can they get closer to her? Could it be that they are destined to just watch this sweet cake? Everyone was feeling itchy, regretting that they would never have the chance to interact with Wei Yuxian in the future. Sure enough, after people get rich, their tempers become different. Wei Yuxian didn't know what the classmates around her thought of her. If she knew, she would probably smile helplessly. They don't understand the situation and are just making random guesses. The situation between her and Cheng Jinjiao is more complicated, and these people don't know about it, so let them think what they want. The next class went smoothly, and Wei Yuxian didn't take Cheng Jinjiao's incident to heart. After the first class, there was still class in the next one. Wei Yuxian got into the car driven by Lu Chengxiao and went to the next classroom. In the car, she was holding her mobile phone and replying to Fu Xuanyi's message. Just now, Fu Xuanyi sent her a message, "Are you adaptable to class?" Wei Yuxian, "I feel very good, very adaptable." Fu Xuanyi, "That's good." These two short sentences made Wei Yuxian feel warm in her heart, and she couldn't help but bring a happy smile to her face. She took the initiative to ask him, "How are you in the company, are you busy at work?" Fu Xuanyi, "Not bad. There is work every day, and there is no way we can finish it no matter how hard we deal with it." Wei Yuxian, "Pay attention to your rest, remember to drink water, and don't drink coffee all the time." When she went to Fu Xuanyi's office, she found that he preferred to drink coffee. It was not good to drink too much of this thing, but it was better to drink less. When Fu Xuanyi saw that she cared about him, a smile appeared on his lips and he replied with the word good. At this moment, Wei Yuxian arrived at the next classroom and sent him a message, "I have to go to class, so I won't tell you any more." There was another reply with the word good. Wei Yuxian put her mobile phone into her bag, with a beautiful smile on her face that couldn't go away. The thought of that man still thinking of me while working was extremely sweet, sweeter than eating honey. She has always been in a good mood. This time she came to the classroom relatively early, there were not many people there, and most of them were still on their way here. She was very successful and sat in the second to last row. Lu Chengxiao and the others were even happier, much happier than Wei Yuxian. Not long after I sat down, people started arriving one after another, and it was time for class. This class is a separate class for their class. There are not many people, and the teacher is much more relaxed when teaching. The morning passed like this. Wei Yuxian had no class in the first period in the afternoon, but only had class in the second period. From now on to the afternoon class, she would have more than 4 hours of free time. She was thinking, should she go to the company to have dinner with Fu Xuanyi? Go secretly and surprise him. But after thinking about it, she gave up the idea, honestly enjoyed the lunch sent by Aunt Fu in the apartment, and went to sleep beautifully. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 162. After the last class in the afternoon, Wei Yuxian eagerly picked up her bag, walked out of the teaching building, and got into Lu Chenxiao's car. As the car drove out of the school gate and turned a corner, she saw the familiar car, and the smile on her face became even brighter. In fact, Fu Xuanyi wanted to go in to pick her up, but she didn't want to because she was afraid of being too high profile, so she asked him to park the car here. After changing cars and getting into Fu Xuanyi's car, she called out as soon as the class started, "Action!" Her voice was high, and you could tell she was very happy. Fu Xuanyi said his voice also filled with joy. The two of them looked at each other, as if they were about to express their lingering love. Wei Yuxian couldn't resist his gaze at first, so she fastened her seat belt and said, "Let's go home." "Go home, yes, go home." She considered it her home. Fu Xuanyi said and started the car. Along the way, the two of them didn't talk much, but the atmosphere in the car was very good. When she got home, the first thing Wei Yuxian did was still hug her two babies, and then tell them how much she missed them. She not only missed Fu Xuanyi, but also missed her two babies. These two little guys were her darlings. Father Fu and Mother Fu saw them coming back with smiles on their faces. The latter asked kindly, "Back?" Wei Yuxian kissed each of the two babies on their faces, smiled and said, "Yeah," and said, "We're back." Fu's mother said, "Let's eat when we get back. Shishi and Zhizi just ate and are very energetic." Wei Yuxian said okay, put Shishi and Zhizi on the movable wooden bed, and reluctantly went to wash her hands. As soon as he washed his hands, he immediately ran out and sat down at the dining table to see the two babies. Fu Xuanyi came out after washing his hands and saw Wei Yuxian's eyes focused on the two babies, and couldn't help but snorted coldly. These two little things are competing with him. Master Xian was in a bad mood just like last week, because these two little things stole his attention. Obviously when we were in the car just now, Guai Guai was all about him, but now Master Xian was jealous again, and inevitably he was jealous of the two children. It's a pity that Wei Yuxian was so focused on the two children that she didn't notice anything wrong with this man's mood. It was Mrs. Fu's sharp eyes that noticed this jealous person. She hit him with her arm and said, "If you want to sleep on the sofa tonight, just keep showing off." Then he whispered, "You are so old, but you are still jealous of your baby. I always know that I am your child." Fu Xuanyi's expression remained unchanged, his hands were clasped in front of his chest, and he looked clearly in a state of indifference. For this reason, Fu's mother let out a ha-ha and said, "Then just wait." Fu Xuanyi walked over and sat down next to Wei Yuxian with a straight face. The movement was louder than usual. It goes without saying what the purpose is, it is to attract Wei Yuxian's attention. But the woman, who only cared about her children, didn't notice the movement and spoke incomprehensible baby talk to the babies. Fu Xuanyi's face turned darker, and he didn't know what to say about these words that he couldn't understand. The two little things couldn't understand them now. He couldn't help coughing twice, making his presence even more obvious. At this time, Wei Yuxian finally noticed the conspicuous bag next to her. He was coughing so obviously that he was afraid that others would not know that he was doing it on purpose. She looked away from the baby and looked over. She saw the man's face was dark and unhappy, and his eyes were still on the two babies. Needless to say, I knew why he was unhappy. For this reason, 3 black lines appeared on Wei Yuxian's forehead. Here it comes again, this man is here again, and he is jealous of the babies again. How can you be so childish for such a grown man? Wei Yuxian said she didn't want to pay attention to him and let him sulk on his own, while he concentrated on eating. Fu Xuanyi's face suddenly turned darker when he saw that she actually ignored him and didn't even want to coax her. He gritted his teeth and ate, a cold aura surrounding him. Fu's mother had a panoramic view of everything, and when she saw Wei Yuxian's performance, she almost clapped her hands and applauded. Let this brat be jealous of anything. Let him not know how to restrain himself. Yuxian is so good, just like this, we can't spoil him or spoil him. Father Fu looked at his daughter-in-law looking like she was watching a show, shook her head helplessly, gave her her favorite dishes, and told her to eat quickly and stop watching the show. This is to avoid chaos in the world. After dinner, Wei Yuxian pushed the small wooden bed and took a walk in the yard, taking the babies out to breathe fresh air. The sky is slowly getting dark and the sun has set. It is a suitable time for the two babies to go out. She was singing as she walked, and you could tell that she was in a good mood. The two babies were also in a good mood, giggling on the bed and kicking their hands and feet wildly, as if they were excited to finally go out and play. The only person who was in a bad mood was Fu Xuanyi. He was following Wei Yuxian with a dark face. It was unclear whether his face was stiff or not. Anyway, Wei Yuxian didn't want to deal with this jealous man. Fu Xuanyi followed them without saying a word. Seeing that the people in front of him didn't even look at him, he became even more angry. He became so petty that he even scared himself. Fu's father and Fu's mother were also walking behind. They are older and they need to exercise more so that their hands and feet will not become too stiff, which is also good for the body. Seeing Fu Xuanyi's appearance, Fu's mother couldn't help but whisper to the people around her, "It's exactly the same as when you were young, with such a bad temper that even the children are jealous." I think back then, Fu's father was like this. Fu's mother was not used to him. Not only did she not coax anyone, but she also wanted to sleep with the baby, which made Fu so angry that he couldn't sleep all night. But this is his own wife, what else can he do except pamper her? Father Fu smiled and shook his head and said, "It's just because I don't dare to mess with you." Fu's mother glanced at him, "You try to provoke him." Father Fu quickly begged for mercy, I don't dare, my wife is the biggest." Fu's mother was in a good mood at his words. She said with satisfaction, "It's good that you know," and held his arm arrogantly. In the front, Wei Yuxian pushed the baby for more than half an hour. Seeing that the energy of the two babies was almost exhausted, she pushed the two babies back. Turning around, seeing the man's dark face, he sighed helplessly and said, "Why are you still angry? Even after walking all the way, his face is still so dark." Fu Xuanyi snorted and said nothing. Wei Yuxian truly feels that Fu Xuanyi is very childish now, even more childish than the two babies. It seemed that if she didn't coax him, he would always have this cold face. But, if he was jealous of the baby every day, would she have to coax him every day? Then she must be exhausted. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 163. She couldn't coddle him like this, so Wei Yuxian decided to ignore the man and pushed the baby straight past him. Her meaning is so obvious. If you are as smart as Fu Xuanyi, you should understand it. Fu Xuanyi's body was a little stiff. He couldn't believe that she just ignored him. He turned around and looked at her back without any hesitation, his pupils slightly dilated. After Wei Yuxian passed Fu Xuanyi, she walked up to Fu's father and Fu's mother and called out, "Master, Madam. Do you want to push the baby?" What she said next was for the old lady. Fu's mother was very satisfied with her performance just now, but she couldn't spoil that brat. She took the cart with a smile and said okay. The baby was handed over to Father Fu and Mother Fu. Wei Yuxian chatted with the old lady as she walked, completely ignoring the man behind her. Fu Xuanyi clenched his fists and looked at the people in front of him, and he lay, looking even more deserted by himself. Okay, together we are a family, right? At this moment, Mr. Xian didn't realize at all how wrong his emotions were, just like a pitiful little man who couldn't get his wife's love. He stared at Wei Yuxian's back to see when she would look back at him, but all the way back to the villa, this woman didn't even look back at him. He didn't even make a move to look back. Master Xian is very unhappy. Very unhappy. And then, Wei Yuxian's actions made him even more heartbroken. After Wei Yuxian returned to the villa, she asked the nanny to give the two babies a bath. After the bath, she pushed the two babies back to the master bedroom and put the babies on the big bed in the master bedroom. Fu Xuanyi. He looked at the two little guys sleeping soundly on the bed, as if they were declaring war on himself. With a calm face, he pulled Wei Yuxian into his arms, stared condescendingly into her eyes, and asked, "What does it mean to be obedient?" Wei Yuxian blinked and asked, "What do you mean?" Fu Xuanyi's eyes were filled with danger. He glanced at the two little heartless boys sleeping soundly on the bed and said nothing. The meaning was obvious. Wei Yuxian understood and said, I have never slept with the babies. They were too young before and I was afraid of crushing them, so I never slept with them. Now that they have grown up, I can finally take action." As she spoke, there was a smile in her eyes. Fu Xuanyi immediately pushed her onto the bed, next to the two babies, and asked, "So, these two little things are more important than me?" Wei Yuxian didn't like what he called the two babies, little things. These were obviously her babies. "They are my babies and your babies. They are not little things. Please speak up." She accused the man and wanted him not to call him such a name. But how can a jealous man care about this? It's a good thing he didn't throw these two little things away. He asked again, "So, these two little things are more important than me?" Wei Yuxian was speechless. She also knew that this man was very jealous, so she didn't care about his title. She said patiently, "No one is more important. The baby is my child, they are very important, and you are also very important. This cannot be compared. Bao Bao and Fu Xuanyi are both equally important." If she had to tell who was more important, she couldn't tell. Fu Xuanyi was trying to embarrass her, insisting on asking such a question. Fu Xuanyi was not satisfied with her answer and wanted to hear her accurate answer, "Who is more important, me or them?" He just wants to compete with the two little guys for favor, and see who is the first in Guiguai's heart. Wei Yuxian still answered as before, "Both you and the baby are important. In my heart, you are equally important, okay? Why does this man have to decide the winner?" "No," was the man's answer. He narrowed his eyes and said, "You have to tell me, who is more important, me or them?" Wei Yuxian was pinned down by the man and felt a little uncomfortable. She struggled under him to get out so that she could feel more comfortable. But as soon as she moved, the man increased his strength to prevent her from continuing to struggle, saying, "Don't move." Wei Yuxian could only remain obedient, not daring to move, and looked at the man. "Answer me," the man urged her, eager to know the answer. Wei Yuxian moved her mouth, and then said, "Fu Xuanyi, you are so childish." Fu Xuanyi's expression was stunned for a moment, and he looked even more childish. How could he still have half of Master Xian's shadow on him? He gritted his teeth and said word by word, "I am childish." Wei Yuxian nodded and said, "Yes, look at you. You are jealous of the babies every day, and you insist on asking me to answer questions like that. If you aren't naive, what are you?" Fu Xuanyi sneered and denied, "I didn't." He refused to admit that he was jealous of the two little things. These two little guys are not worthy of his jealousy. A tough-talking man will never admit it. "Wei Yuxian, you still say no? Look at what you look like now. And the question you just asked, think about it yourself." Fu Xuanyi thought about it carefully and found that he was indeed jealous of the two little guys. When he saw Guiguai's eyes focused on these two little guys, he was very unhappy. Okay, he is indeed jealous, but he won't admit it. He said stiffly, "I just want to know who is more important in your heart." He wants to be the most important person in her heart. Wei Yuxian stretched out her hand and stroked the man's stern face, asking him not to be so tense, and said warmly, "I've said it before, you and the baby can't be compared, your identities are different. Ah Xian, the baby is also your baby. Can you not always have trouble with the baby in the future?" She didn't want Fu Xuanyi to dislike the two babies because of this. She was very afraid that her two babies would not receive their father's love and would not be able to grow up in a loving family. "So, what's the difference from when she was little?" Fu Xuanyi was smoothed down a little by her, but it was just a little, and said, "But you ignored me for them. How many times have you looked at me tonight?" Wei Yuxian felt that the scene tonight was inexplicably familiar. That night last week, wasn't the situation similar to today? How many times will this man feel the same jealousy? Wei Yuxian's mind turned around and she said, "Who told you to keep a cold face tonight? How dare I talk to you?" She put all the blame on him. Indeed, it was this man's fault. If he hadn't been jealous and cold-faced, would she have ignored him? After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 164. Fu Xuanyi didn't expect that she would be so eloquent tonight and would be able to put the blame on herself. He was so angry that he lowered his head, kissed her hard on the lips, and said, "If you pay attention to me, how can I be so cold-faced?" Wei Yuxian was now under the control of others, pinned down by the man and unable to resist. She knew that if this continued, she would be the one to suffer. Moreover, she didn't want to have such a tense relationship with this man. She didn't mean to completely ignore him, she just wanted him to know his mistake and that it was wrong to be jealous of the baby. But now it seems that this man will never know his mistakes, he is terrifyingly stubborn. Wei Yuxian looked at the danger in the man's eyes, fearing that the man would do something outrageous the next second. In order to protect her health, she chose to soften her attitude and her voice. She raised her head proactively, kissed the man on the lips, and said, "Axuan, I don't want you to misunderstand the baby, and I don't want you to hate the baby. I'm scared that you don't like babies." Fu Xuanyi didn't expect that she would think of this level and think so deeply. He was dissatisfied with the two little guys taking away Guiguai's attention, but he had never had the idea of hating the two children. After all, this is his and Guiguai's flesh and blood, their product, how could he hate it? He sat up, pulled Wei Yuxian up and put her on his lap, saying, "I don't hate them, I just don't want you to ignore me." Wei Yuxian was kneeling on his lap facing each other. This posture was a bit shy, and she was a little afraid to look at the man. She wanted to sit in a different position, at least not in this position, but as soon as she moved, she was held down by the man. I only heard the man say, "Sit down obediently." It would be dangerous to move around. Wei Yuxian rarely heard the hidden meaning in the man's words. She didn't dare to move, closed her legs tightly, and said, "I didn't neglect you, I haven't seen the baby for a day, and it's normal to want to stay with the baby. Besides, shouldn't I sleep with you at night? I spend much more time with you than with the baby." Fu Xuanyi thought that this was the truth, and he didn't know what to say. He was wrong. Seeing that this man was finally willing to listen, Wei Yuxian quickly pursued the victory and said, "Axuan, please stop having conflicts with the baby, okay? I don't want to have conflicts with you either." Seeing her soft and cute look, Fu Xuanyi couldn't bear to say anything, so he said in a low voice. There was a smile in Wei Yuxian's eyes, she was obviously happy, and her mood was obviously much better. She added, "Then you can stop being jealous of the babies in the future, okay?" Fu Xuanyi firmly refused to admit that he was jealous and corrected him, "I'm not jealous." Wei Yuxian didn't know that this man was so good looking, so she snickered in her heart, "Okay, okay, you're not jealous, then don't compete with the babies for this time, okay? You are so generous, you won't argue with the babies, right?" She put it another way and put a tall hat on the man. Fu Xuanyi was very pleased with what she said. It was so comfortable in his ears that he almost said again. When he came to the end, he added in time, "As long as you don't ignore me." Wei Yuxian said quickly, "Okay, okay, I will never neglect you because of the baby." She agreed quickly, as if she was afraid that the man would regret it 1 second later. At this point, the little disagreement between the two tonight was finally resolved satisfactorily. Both parties took a step back, but took a big step forward. Wei Yuxian breathed a sigh of relief. As long as the man stops being jealous of the baby, many problems will be solved, and she no longer has to worry about the relationship between the man and the baby becoming bad. People who have experienced bad families often hope that their families can be harmonious and that their children can live a happier life. This matter has been resolved, but there is still one thing that has not been resolved, and that is, the two little guys sleeping soundly on the bed. Fu Xuanyi put his big hands on Wei Yuxian's lower back and held her tightly with a force that could not be refused. Then, his eyes fell on the two little guys over there. They. Two words came out of the man's mouth. Wei Yuxian also turned her gaze towards the two adorable babies, her eyes suddenly becoming softer. Fu Xuanyi felt that these two little guys were too annoying here and they were not suitable to appear on this bed. Wei Yuxian turned her head and saw the man's eyes. She knew what he wanted to say without the man having to say anything. I just want to send the two babies out and don't want them to sleep here. But she really wanted to sleep with the baby tonight. She rarely sleeps with the babies. During the confinement period, she could sleep with the babies during the afternoon nap, but she had never slept with them at night. Because babies are too young, they are prone to fussing at night, and no one knows when they will wake up in the middle of the night, so they need someone to watch them all the time. Therefore, the nanny took turns watching them at night. Now, the two babies have grown up a lot, and Wei Yuxian can't help it anymore. She wants to sleep with the two babies, hold them in her arms, and smell their milky fragrance. She stretched out her hand and tugged on the man's clothes, slightly, like a little white rabbit asking for help from the king. Actuan, I want to sleep with the babies tonight. Fu Xuanyi looked into her eyes and said nothing, not knowing whether he agreed or disagreed. Wei Yuxian saw 3 words of disagreement in his eyes. Needless to say, these 3 words radiated from the inside out. She knew that a man would be the answer. She didn't give up right away and said, it's just one night. I've never slept with the babies at night. Can you just fulfill my little wish? As she said that, she tugged on the man's clothes again, showing an obvious sign of weakness. Fu Xuanyi looked at her for a while and then said, yes, but there are conditions. Wei Yuxian immediately nodded happily, while not forgetting to say, don't go too far. She hoped that this man would put forward conditions. Whenever she asked him for something, he would not forget to mention 1 or 2 conditions, and the conditions were nothing more than those. Fu Xuanyi wanted to take the opportunity to put forward some excessive conditions, but when he thought that the person in his arms would not agree, he gave up and only put forward the simplest conditions. Kiss me. This is the simplest, and his obedience can accept it. Wei Yuxian can indeed accept this condition. Although she still feels shy, she has bravely taken that step. This was not the first time that she took the initiative to kiss Fu Xuanyi. It would be okay if she did it one more time. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Ju Yi. Chapter 165. She blushed slightly, said okay in a low voice, and then said, You close your eyes. Being looked at so directly by a man made her even more embarrassed and afraid to act. After hearing this, Fu Xuanyi closed his beautiful eyes and quietly waited for her kiss. Wei Yuxian became nervous, put her hands on the hem of her clothes, held them tightly, looked at the man's handsome face, and swallowed. The beauty is alluring. Under the dim light, the shadows of the two people hit the wall. Their distance was so close, and their hearts were also so close. Wei Yuxian took a deep breath, and slowly moved closer to the man, staring at his thin lips, and her breathing became heavier and heavier. Finally, she pressed her thin lips, and the cool and soft touch came, and her heart softened. This man will never be satisfied with just a little taste. Wei Yuxian tried to go deeper, testing bit by bit, but her experience was pitiful and her movements were unfamiliar. However, She had some experience at least. She recalled Fu Xuanyi's previous actions in her mind, and followed what the man taught him, and tested them on him one by one. The feeling of taking the initiative was so embarrassing, much more embarrassing than being kissed by this man. Wei Yuxian lowered her hands from the hem of her clothes and raised them to wrap around the man's neck, getting closer to him. Fu Xuanyi quietly opened his eyes and looked at the person in front of him. At this moment, his eyes were tightly closed, his face was red, and his movements were unfamiliar and tight, but he was very serious. Her breathing suddenly became rapid, and the fire in her body was stirred up by her. He moved his big hand up and put it on the back of her head, turning the tables on her. The tender kiss suddenly became intense. Before Wei Yuxian could react, she was led into a certain rhythm by the man. The temperature in the room rose rapidly, and even the air became ambiguous. Both of them were immersed in the beauty brought by the other. I don't know how much time passed before they were finally willing to separate, but their hands holding each other still didn't let go. Wei Yuxian lost all her strength and fell into his arms as if she had no bones. Not only was her face red, but the tips of her ears were also red. She gasped for air and came back to life. She was so shy that she lowered her head and did not dare to look at the man. But the man didn't think it was enough. Looking at her seductive look, he couldn't help but kiss the corners of her lips a few more times. This made Wei Yuxian even more shy. She gave him a cute look and lowered her head. Hearing the man's low laughter, Wei Yuxian couldn't stay any longer and hurriedly got up from the man and went into the bathroom to take a shower. After she came out of the bath, the red cloud on her face had gone away, and she returned to normal. She whispered, "You should also take a bath and go to bed early." She didn't dare to speak too loudly for fear of waking up the two babies. Fu Xuanyi said got up and entered the bathroom. Wei Yuxian sat down gently on the bed and looked at the sleeping baby on the bed. The two babies are also very well behaved when sleeping. They are white and tender, and their little hands are placed together when sleeping, holding them unconsciously. They have a good relationship. Wei Yuxian couldn't help but pull out Zizi's little hand, put it in the palm of her hand, and compare it with her own hand. Then I discovered that Zizi's little hands are really small. Super cute. She then pulled out Shishi's little hand and put it into her palm, and was made cute again. Finally, she couldn't bear it any longer. She took her phone and took various photos of the two babies, recording every detail of them. Just the little hands of the babies took dozens of photos. When Fu Xuanyi came out of the bathroom, he saw the person on the bed holding up his mobile phone and taking photos frantically, with a happy giggle on his face. The corners of his mouth curled up involuntarily, and he walked towards the bed. When Wei Yuxian heard the commotion and looked over, she realized that Fu Xuanyi had already finished taking a bath. She quickly checked the time and realized that she had been taking pictures of the baby for so long. She reluctantly put her phone away and put it on the bedside table. After the man sat down, she said, "Axuan, let's get some photo albums for the babies. I want to record their appearance from childhood to adulthood. In the future, when they grow up, they can also see what they looked like when they were little." When she was a child, she rarely took photos. Apart from group photos at school or photos required by the school, there were no other photos. Her adoptive parents don't know how to use her photos on their mobile phones, and her figure has never appeared in their family's photo albums, only their family. Therefore, she didn't want her two babies to have such regrets. Also, when the babies grow up, she can take out those photo albums and look at them at any time to remember what they looked like when they were little. Anyway, there are many benefits. Fu Xuanyi would not be dissatisfied with this little wish of hers. He said, "I will tell it to Aunt Fu tomorrow." Wei Yuxian's eyes curled up and she said happily. She took advantage of the situation and lay down on the bed, lying on the other side of the bed, with the two babies right in the middle. She stretched out her hands and hugged the two babies. Then he looked at Fu Xuanyi and said, "Turn off the lights and go to sleep." Fu Xuanyi. He made no movement, with a smile on his face, and shouted, "Be good." He didn't agree with the two little guys sleeping in the middle. He also doesn't agree with his obedient holding two little guys. Wei Yuxian felt a little guilty, but she didn't take her hand back and said, "Just one night, Ah Xian." She called the man's name, as if coquettishly. Fu Xuanyi was unmoved, folded his hands on his chest, and said, "I don't agree." Actuan Wei Yuxian called again, her coquettish tone more obvious, "Just one night." Fu Xuanyi looked at her and confronted her. Wei Yuxian opened her eyes wide and pretended to be pitiful. After a while, the man softened his heart, glanced at the two little guys with squinted eyes, and thought, "Just one night." He was generous and kind-hearted and gave guai to them for one night. Fu Xuanyi really felt that he was extremely generous, with a bit of arrogance on his face, so he turned off the light and said, "Sleep." Wei Yuxian said good night to him beautifully and closed her eyes. Fu Xuanyi also closed his eyes, wanting to fall asleep quickly. He thought it was just one night and he could get through it. But not long after, he opened his eyes and looked at the other three people on the bed in the dark. Over there, the elder and the younger were sleeping soundly, with a hint of a smile on their lips, but he was the only one, sleeping, not sleeping. His hands are so lonely, and his arms are so empty. There is one person missing, and his obedience is missing. He can't sleep without holding his dear. Fu Xuanyi was a little depressed. He stared at the sleeping person for a while, and then took action. He carried the person to the side of the bed and held him in his arms. Only then did he feel relieved. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 166. When Wei Yuxian woke up the next day, she saw the two babies in front of her. She didn't react yet. When she felt the warmth coming from behind, she started to get confused. There was also a strong big hand around her waist. With this familiar feeling and smell, Wei Yuxian knew who it was without looking back. Who else could it be besides Fu Xuanyi? She continued to be confused and recalled last night. She remembered that she slept on the other side last night. The two babies were in the middle, she would definitely remember it. But now, how come the two babies are here? How did she end up in the middle, in Fu Xuanyi's arms? She sat up with a puzzled look on her face, looked at the man behind her, and then at the baby in front of her, unable to think of a reason. Could it be that she rolled over here while sleeping last night? Impossible. If she rolled over, she would definitely crush the two babies, and she was very calm when sleeping, so she would not roll around. Then, there is only one possibility left, it was Fu Xuanyi who brought her here. Thinking of this, she turned around to look at the man behind her. At this moment, the man also woke up and looked at her with a smile in his eyes. Seeing this, Wei Yuxian became more sure of what she was thinking. It was this man who carried her over. Now, it's hard for her to say anything about men. Things have already happened, and it's useless for her to say anything else. She looked at him helplessly and said, "Don't do this next time. The reason why I put the babies in the middle is because I was afraid that they would roll to the edge of the bed. Fortunately, nothing serious happened. The two babies are also peaceful when sleeping, they don't roll around, and nothing bad happens." Hearing this, Fu Xuanyi said, "There will be no next time. What he meant by this was that these two little guys would never have the chance to sleep in this bed again. But Wei Yuxian understood that he had agreed to what she just said, so she felt better and got up happily. She first handed the babies to the nanny and asked the nanny to take care of the babies who were about to wake up, and then she went to wash herself. After washing and eating breakfast, she went to prepare the day's rations for the babies, and then she went to school. Today, Tuesday, Wei Yuxian has 3 classes. The time is the same as yesterday. There is no class in the first period in the afternoon. When she got to school, it was Fu Xuanyi who sent her downstairs. When they parted, she and Fu Xuanyi had a passionate kiss. In the end, it was too late, so the man let her go. Wei Yuxian went to class with her slightly swollen lips. She kept her head down the whole way and didn't dare to raise it up at all. Now everyone knows that she is Fu Xuanyi's fiancée. I think everyone can guess why her lips turned like this. This made a thin-skinned person scold Master Xian for a long time. Fortunately, after she sat down, the situation became much better, because she had no time to care about others and only thought about class. After a morning of class, Wei Yuxian had an extremely fulfilling life and learned a lot of knowledge. Studying feels really good, especially studying without distractions and without too much pressure. This is the best feeling. This is Wei Yuxian's idea, not the idea of most people. After getting into the car driven by Lu Changxiao, the 4 bodyguards were still following her closely, protecting her dutifully. At this time, she should go back to the apartment to eat. But when she thought that there were still more than 4 hours before the next class, she had other thoughts. I had this idea yesterday, that is, go to Fu Xuanyi's company, give him a surprise, and then have lunch with him. After lunch, it wouldn't be a problem for her to take another nap, there would be enough time. With this idea, she felt itchy in her heart. After arriving downstairs in the apartment, she suddenly said, "Lu Changxiao, go to the company." Lu Changxiao and the other 3 people looked puzzled and asked, "Madam, why are you going to the company? It's noon, and there are classes in the afternoon." Wei Yuxian said, "The afternoon class is still a long time away, I just want to go to the company." At this time, Lu Changxiao and others also guessed her intention. "I don't have a meal at noon, but I have to go to the company to see Master Xian. What else can I do besides eating with Master Xian?" The relationship between Master Xian and his wife is really good. Akong immediately smiled and said, "Then I'll go find housekeeper Fu to get some food." "Madam, I'll wait for a while." Aunt Fu's car was right next to them. Akong got out of the car, explained the situation to Aunt Fu, took the food, got in the car again, and said, "Boss, let's go." Without saying a word, Lu Changxiao started the car, drove out of the school gate, and drove towards the Fu group. Several people had a tacit understanding and did not report to Fu Xuanyi that his wife was going to have dinner with him. Madame made this out of the blue, she must have wanted to give Master Xian a surprise. If she had said it out, there would be no surprise. Wei Yuxian looked at the receding scenery outside the window, and her heart beat slightly faster. The closer she got to the company, the faster her heart beat. She was a little nervous, this was her first time doing something like this. There is not much distance between the school and the company, and there are no cars at noon, so the car quickly drove into the underground parking lot of the Fu group. Lu Changxiao smiled with 8 big white teeth and said, "Madam, we are here, do you want us to accompany you up?" Wei Yuxian shook her head and said, "There is no danger here. You can go and have a rest. Come pick me up around 4 o'clock. This is Fu Xuanyi's territory, what danger could happen? Even if there was real danger, who would be stupid enough to act under Fu Xuanyi's nose?" She made plans to eat here with Fu Xuanyi, sleep here for a while after eating, and then go to school. I picked her up around 4 o'clock, just in time. Lu Changxiao said okay, got out of the car, opened the door for her, and took her to the elevator himself. This point is a meal point. Most people in the company are eating. The employees cherish this rare rest time. Wei Yuxian watched the elevator's floors rise one by one. The numbers slowly became larger and closer to Fu Xuanyi, and her heart accelerated uncontrollably. It's like I'm about to do something bad, I'm very nervous. She was holding a box lunch in her hand, taking a deep breath in the elevator, looking at herself in the elevator, and arranging her hair. As soon as they were sorted out, the elevator stopped at the floor of the president's office. The elevator door opened, and a familiar place came into view. Wei Yuxian took a deep breath again, walked out of the elevator, and walked towards Fu Xuanyi's office step by step. She wanted to surprise Fu Xuanyi, so she even walked much more slowly when she walked. When she came to the office door, she didn't knock on the door. She opened the door gently and walked in without making any sound. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 167. After walking in, she thought she could see Fu Xuanyi eating, but to her surprise, there was no one in the office. She was a little disappointed, not seeing the person she wanted to see. She walked in with her meal and stopped in front of Fu Xuanyi's desk. She sat down on the chair, thinking that Fu Xuanyi would have gone to a meeting after a while. The company is so big and has many things to deal with, so it is possible to postpone the meeting for a while. She waited quietly in the office for more than 10 minutes, during which she looked in the direction of the door countless times. Every time, she expected the door to open and the person she wanted to see to walk in, but every time, she was disappointed. Not once did the door open, and not once did the person she wanted to see walk through. After picking up her phone and taking a look at it, she finally couldn't wait any longer, got up and walked out of the office, going to the assistant's office next door. As soon as she walked in, she saw several assistants sitting together to eat, playing with their mobile phones while eating, not looking too leisurely. When several people suddenly saw Wei Yuxian walking in, they were all stunned while eating. One of them reacted first, put down his rice and came to her. "Madam, why are you here?" the assistant asked with a smile. Several other assistants also came to their senses, quickly put down their meals and walked over. Wei Yuxian got straight to the point and asked, "Where are you, Mr. Fu? Is the meeting delayed?" The assistant standing at the front said, "Madam, Mr. Fu went to have dinner with Miss Jean, about half an hour ago. I will tell Mr. Fu now that you are here." Upon hearing the word Miss Jean, the first thing that came to Wei Yuxian's mind was Qin Junling. She was stunned for a moment, and her heart skipped a beat. When she came to her senses, she saw her assistant holding her cell phone, as if she wanted to send a message to Fu Xuanyi. Somehow, she hurriedly said, "No, don't tell him." She didn't know what was wrong with her, her mood immediately became depressed, and she became a little panicked. He didn't want Fu Xuanyi to know that he had come to the company. The assistant looked at her with some confusion, seeing that her face was a little pale, and asked, "What's wrong with you, madam?" Wei Yuxian forced a smile and tried to force out a smile, but the smile turned out to be uglier than crying. "It's nothing, I just, don't need to tell him, I'll just wait for him in the office." After saying that, she said thank you to her assistant, left the office, and walked back to Fu Xuanyi's office absent-mindedly. Several assistants looked at her like this and were a little worried. One of them asked, "Did Madam misunderstand something? But Mr. Fu is indeed having dinner with Miss Jean. But Madam's face is pale, will something happen? How about we tell Mr. Fu? Didn't Madam say you don't need to tell? But look at the way Madam looks like, what if something happens? We can't even eat and walk around. Then let's tell Mr. Fu." The few people discussed the result and quickly typed to inform Fu Xuanyi about Wei Yuxian's presence in the company. Here, in the CEO's office, Wei Yuxian's face was still so pale. She didn't even know how she got back to the office. She sat on Fu Xuanyi's chair and stared blankly at the lunch box on the table, with the words the assistant just said echoing in her mind. Mr. Fu went to have dinner with Miss Jean. Mr. Fu went to have dinner with Miss Jean. Mr. Fu went to have dinner with Miss Jean. Over and over again, it was recalled in her mind and struck on her heart. Why does Fu Xuanyi want to eat with Qin Junling? Is it to discuss cooperation, or is there some other reason? Qin Junling. She knew that she shouldn't think about Fu Xuanyi so much. She should believe that Fu Xuanyi was not that kind of person. If Fu Xuanyi was interested in Qin Junling, he wouldn't have delayed it until now. However, she just couldn't help but think about the worst consequences. As for why you think so? Probably because she liked Fu Xuanyi more and was afraid of losing him. I am afraid that my charm is not enough to keep him, and I am also afraid that the temptation outside is too great and attracts him. He is standing in such a high position, with so many people of all kinds around him, and there is no shortage of great beauties, so the temptation is not small. If one day he doesn't like himself anymore and likes someone else. Wei Yuxian covered her mouth, not daring to think further. Tears slowly gathered in her eyes. She was immersed in sadness, thinking only about the worst outcome, but she never thought about how deep Fu Xuanyi's love was for her. She was still too unsure of herself, underestimated her importance in Fu Xuanyi's heart, and overestimated the temptation outside. It had been a long time since she had been in such a low mood, and Wei Yuxian felt unfamiliar with such a mood. She hasn't been so sad since she cried last time when she learned the news that her biological parents were gone. Obviously you shouldn't think about Fu Xuanyi like this, you should believe him, but when you think of him eating with other women, your heart aches. Even breathing became painful. She was sad alone in the office. After crying for a while, she began to wonder whether she should stay in the office any longer. If Fu Xuanyi comes back later and sees her like this, will he dislike her even more? From then on, her position in Fu Xuanyi's heart plummeted. Then, it would be better to leave. She remained silent, pretending that nothing had happened. She had never been to the company, and she didn't know that Fu Xuanyi had dinner with another woman. This seems better. Thinking like this, Wei Yuxian wiped the tears from her face, prepared to clean herself up, and left the company silently. Suddenly, the office door opened. She thought it was Special Assistant Guan or an assistant coming in. When she looked up, she saw Fu Xuanyi. This man looked tired, his steps were hurried, his face was not very good, and he walked towards her step by step. Wei Yuxian's heart skipped a beat and she looked at the man. She quickly wiped the tears on her face and forced a smile. This smile made Fu Xuanyi's heart twitch. Just now, after receiving the assistant's message, he immediately set off and rushed back without saying a word. Unexpectedly, as soon as he entered the door, he saw this little guy secretly wiping tears. His heart immediately rose, and his expression became cold unconsciously. He knew that Guai must have misunderstood his relationship with Qin Junling. Otherwise, why would he secretly hide here and cry? He finally walked up to her and looked at her condescendingly, thinking about how to speak. His silence and cold face had another meaning in Wei Yuxian's eyes. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 168. Wei Yuxian believed that the reason why he had a dark face was because she interrupted his lunch with Qin Junling. I'm sorry. These 3 words were spoken without thinking. Tears flowed out uncontrollably again, blurring her eyes, and she did not see the distress in Fu Xuanyi's eyes. At this moment, Fu Xuanyi couldn't care less about his cold face. He quickly picked her up, put her on his lap, and wiped her tears. He whispered softly in her ear, "I misunderstood you." Wei Yuxian sniffed, and upon hearing his words, tears burst out even more violently, and she couldn't stop them. While wiping her tears, Fu Xuanyi said succinctly, "She invited me to dinner in the name of the company, and she was the only one there. I didn't want to eat with her. If it weren't for the project she was working on that made him excited, he wouldn't have gone to the dinner party at noon. He took someone with him, but when he arrived, she was the only one there. Anyone with a discerning eye could understand what that meant." He didn't stay to eat, but turned around and left on the spot. On the way back, he received a message from his assistant and ordered someone to speed up and drive back. Never thought that his obedient mood would get out of control like this. It's all that woman's fault. If it weren't for her, why would his darling cry so sadly? Don't even bother with that project. The project was very good and he was very excited, but that woman had an impure mind and made his darling so sad and uncooperative, so that's fine. He stroked her cheek lovingly and wiped away her tears over and over again, but as soon as he wiped them away, new tears welled up again. He felt that he couldn't tell the story clearly, and since he was the only one, he wasn't convinced enough, so he called Guan Jinyu in. When Guan Jinyu came in and took a look at the situation, he didn't know what was going on. He glanced at his boss Fu and understood what he meant. "Madam, Miss Jean invited us to discuss the project together at noon today. Mr. Fu and several of me went there, but when we got there, Miss Jean was the only one, and Mr. Fu left without saying a word. Don't worry, Mr. Fu will never eat alone with Miss Jean. Don't misunderstand Mr. Fu or hurt the relationship between you and Mr. Fu." After saying that, Guan Jinyu looked at Fu Xuanyi, and after receiving Fu Xuanyi's eyes, he left the office. Wei Yuxian heard Guan Jinyu's words and knew that she had misunderstood Fu Xuanyi. The sadness in her heart dissipated and she did not dare to see him anymore. Slowly, her tears stopped and she calmed down, but her head was lowered, not daring to face the man. Fu Xuanyi waited patiently for her to regain her mood, raised her little face, her eyes and nose were red from crying, as if she had been greatly wronged. "Sorry, you misunderstood," the man said with sincerity. Wei Yuxian felt a little embarrassed. After all, it was because she didn't believe Fu Xuanyi that this misunderstanding occurred. If she wanted to apologize, it wasn't Fu Xuanyi who should apologize to her. She opened her mouth, wanting to say it didn't matter, but she couldn't say it, she was too embarrassed to say it. After Fu Xuanyi apologized, he began to settle accounts with her, saying, "Don't believe me, dear." His eyes narrowed dangerously, looking at Wei Yuxian as if he were looking at prey on a plate. Wei Yuxian felt even more guilty. She turned her eyes aside and said, I couldn't hold back a word for a long time. There was nothing to say. She did not believe Fu Xuanyi just now. This was a fact. She would be wrong no matter how this man wanted to punish her. Fu Xuanyi leaned his head against her forehead and asked, "Why don't you believe me? Do you think my love for you is fake?" Wei Yuxian suddenly became flustered and said, I didn't, I think it's fake." Fu Xuanyi continued to press, "Does Guai think that I am not dedicated?" Wei Yuxian really thought so. She felt extremely guilty and said, No. Fu Xuanyi held her hand with more strength, brought her closer to his arms, and said again, "Don't believe me, dear." He chewed on this sentence, as if he wanted to think it through. Wei Yuxian heard the dangerous meaning in his words and said, I just feel that the temptation outside is too great. You stand in such a high position, the temptation is even greater." Before she finished speaking, Fu Xuanyi interrupted her, Guai, do you know how many people wanted to send someone to my bed before I met you? Wei Yuxian shook her head blankly and looked into the man's eyes. There are so many, you have to queue up, the man said, but I'm not interested in those people. Only you are different. Do you understand? He didn't touch any of those people, or even look at them. Except for his obedience, he is sexually frigid to all women. Wei Yuxian nodded ignorantly. In this way, it was really no different from that pure white little white rabbit. Fu Xuanyi's eyes darkened, with fire burning in his eyes. He said in her ear, "It seems it's time to let Guai Guai know how deep my love for you is." After saying that, he picked up the princess with a big hand and walked into the small room. Wei Yuxian was afraid of falling, so she wrapped her arms around the man's neck. She saw the danger in the man's eyes and became a little scared. She intuitively knew that this man would not let her go so easily. She quickly said, "Actuan, I haven't eaten yet." At this moment, Fu Xuanyi just wanted to let her know how much he loved her, but when he thought that her health was not very good and it took a long time to nurse her back to health, she finally got better, so he still resisted his desire and hugged her back. He opened the lunch box silently and fed her. Wei Yuxian wanted to eat by herself, but once she caught the man's gaze, she didn't dare to say anything and silently accepted the man's feeding. Fu Xuanyi fed her food, and while feeding her, he kissed her ears from time to time, trying to relieve his desire. But the closer we get, the more intense the desire becomes. Want more? It was almost done, so he only fed the person half full, fearing that overeating would cause trouble. He picked her up again. This time, it was not the princess who hugged him, but Wei Yuxian holding his waist and holding her hips, and walked in while kissing. The man's breath became hot, and the breath he sprayed was so hot that it burned Wei Yuxian's delicate skin. She was a little scared, but she didn't dare to resist because she was in the wrong and had to quell the man's desire. She knew that the man would not let her go easily next, so even though she was afraid, she gritted her teeth and persisted, trying to coax the man. On the bed, while being kissed in a daze, she suddenly remembered that she had another class in the afternoon, so she quickly grabbed the man's hand and said, "Actuan, I have another class in the afternoon." Fu Xuanyi's voice was low, "Pay attention, be a good boy. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Ju Yi. Chapter 169. This afternoon, in this small room, the two met frankly. Wei Yuxian listened to the man say "I love you" countless times, and every time, it was deeply engraved in her heart. Only then did she realize how deep the man's love for her was. Naturally, he didn't go to the afternoon class, and Fu Xuanyi didn't go to work. The two of them were crazy for a long time. The sun sets in the west, and the beautiful dusk emerges on the horizon. The sun sets in the west, and the scenery is beautiful. In the small room, Fu Xuanyi was neatly dressed, but his hair was loose, looking much more youthful and energetic. He walked to the bed and looked at the unconscious person on the bed. His body was covered in sweat and his face was red. Recalling the madness of this afternoon, the corners of my mouth couldn't help but curl up. He picked her up under the quilt. In the process, Wei Yuxian squeaked uneasily a few times, frowned, and said, "No more." Fu Xuanyi rubbed the ridge between her eyebrows and said softly, "Go to sleep, be a good boy." Wei Yuxian made no movement, and Fu Xuanyi successfully picked her up. The quilt wrapped her tightly, leaving only a delicate little face exposed. He carried the person out of the small room, walked out of the office, took the elevator, went to the underground parking lot, and carried the person into the car. After receiving Mr. Fu's order, the driver was already waiting in the car. As soon as he saw people getting into the car, he immediately raised the fender and started the car. The car was very quiet. Fu Xuanyi did not let go of the person in his arms, even holding him while riding in the car. He couldn't bear to let go of his obedience, not even for a second. Just like that, he lowered his head and looked at the peaceful sleeping face of the person in his arms. Guai seemed exhausted. He slept soundly. The blush on his face still didn't go away. He looked very attractive. He couldn't help but think of the way Kuabai cried in his arms this afternoon. It was so beautiful that he couldn't restrain himself and loved her harder. The sweet voice seemed to echo in my ears again. He lowered his head and kissed her on the lips, without going deep, for fear of disturbing her sleep. Guai is already very tired. She must have a good sleep and rest without waking anyone up again. He will feel bad if Guai doesn't get enough sleep. In this way, he looked at people all the way, and he never got tired of watching them. From time to time, he would lower his head and give them a kiss, his eyes full of pity. To be honest, when he saw that Guai didn't trust him, his heart hurt a little. But soon, the stinging pain disappeared. Guai doesn't believe him, it's just because he shows less love and talks less love. Then, if you want Guai to believe it, you have to take action and tell her over and over again in her ears. Love her. Let her remember it all the time, even in her dreams. He didn't believe it. After today, his Guai still didn't know how strong his love was. The driver drove the car back to Daefu Mansion, stopped at the door of the villa, then quickly got out of the car, came to the back, opened the door, and said, "Master Xian, we're here." Fu Xuanyi regained his composure, said yeah, held the person in his arms firmly, and got out of the car. The driver lowered his head consciously and did not look around. After getting out of the car, the driver quickly closed the door, walked in front of Fu Xuanyi, and opened the door for him first. As Mr. Xian's driver, you still need to have this bit of vision, otherwise you won't be able to get into this position. Fu Xuanyi entered the house without any obstruction, and went upstairs to his room without even changing his shoes. Fu's father, Fu's mother, and Master Xian were all in the living room. It was almost dinner time, and the two elders were waiting for them to come back for dinner. Unexpectedly, they saw such a scene. Their son, whose hair was a little messy, was holding a ball of quilt in his hand, and there seemed to be someone inside, so he went home like this. The second elder quickly got up and walked over, asking Fu Xuanyi what was going on with his eyes. Fu Xuanyi wanted to send her to the bed quickly so that she could sleep more comfortably, so he whispered, "We'll talk about it later." The second elder stretched his neck and looked into his arms. When he saw Wei Yuxian's face, he breathed a sigh of relief, nodded, and put the person on. If he was holding a vixen in his arms, the old lady would turn against him without even saying a word. The only daughter-in-law she recognized was Wei Yuxian, and no one else could covet this position. Fortunately, her son made no mistake. But come to think of it, if Xian is so passionate about Yuxian, why would he find another woman? She should have believed in her son. I just don't know why they came back like this today. Yuxian came back wrapped in a quilt. Suddenly, the old lady thought of something and scolded Fu Xuanyi in her heart for being shameless. He didn't know how to put some clothes on Yuxian, but he just came back with someone in his arms, and the smell hadn't dissipated yet. Young people really know how to play. Thinking back when they were young, it seems that they were no less generous. Here, Fu Xuanyi carried her back to the room, put her on the soft big bed, covered her with a quilt, straightened her hair, and kissed her on the lips a few more times before leaving the room. As he went downstairs, he took off his coat, took off his tie and suit, and unbuttoned two shirts, revealing his delicate and beautiful collarbones. Downstairs, the two elders looked forward to it and finally saw him coming down, so they hurriedly called people over. Fu Xuanyi was not in a hurry. He changed his shoes first and washed his hands before walking over and sitting down. As soon as she sat down, Fu's mother pulled her and asked, What's going on between you and Yuxian? You don't know how to pay attention in broad daylight. Fu Xuanyi said while eating, there was a small misunderstanding at noon, and it was resolved. Fu's mother's mouth twitched, dissatisfied with his conciseness, and asked again, what's the little misunderstanding that made Yuxian so upset? It seems like you didn't go to work in the afternoon. Fu Xuanyi didn't feel embarrassed at all. In Wei Yuxian's words, he was thick-skinned. He said and told the elders about what happened at noon in simple language. Of course, I'm talking about what happened before entering the small room. The second elder doesn't need to know the rest. He was embarrassed to say it, but the second elder was embarrassed to listen, and his obedient one would blush to the point of exploding. After hearing what he said, the second elder thought of the way Wei Yuxian came back wrapped up, and Fu's mother said, then you can't torture someone like this. Fu Xuanyi ate his meal with a calm expression and said, she won't remember it if I don't bother. Can't remember how much he loves her, can't remember to trust him. It's hard for Fu's mother to say anything about things between the two of them, especially emotional matters and things in bed. It's even harder for her to say anything. In the end, Fu's mother could only say, then you should be careful and don't torment Yuxian all the time. Her health has improved a lot. Fu Xuanyi said to show that he was sensible. When dinner was almost finished, he said again, I'll give you a surprise tomorrow. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. After getting pregnant, the celibate Buddhist fiercely dotes on his beloved wife. Author, Zhu Yi. Chapter 170. When Fu's mother heard this, her curiosity arose and she asked, what surprise can't be told now? Fu Xuanyi, now that I have said it, it won't be called a surprise. Fu's mother still wanted to know, and said, if you know it sooner or later, you will know it. It's okay for you to tell me now. Your dad also wants to know. She punched Father Fu next to her, who responded with a hum and said, yes, I want to know too. He had to think about his wife's orders even if he didn't want to know. Fu Xuanyi had decided not to let go. No matter what the two elders said, he did not reveal the surprise. The second elder began to guess what the surprise was. After guessing it over and over, Fu Xuanyi shook his head. After not staying in the living room for long, Fu Xuanyi went back to the room. He glanced at the person on the bed, but he still didn't look like he was about to wake up, and then went to the study with peace of mind. Sitting in his office chair, he turned on his computer, clicked through emails, and took out his cell phone to call Guan Jinyu. As Fu Xuanyi's special assistant, Guan Jinyu is on call 24 hours a day. Especially since Fu Xuanyi didn't go to work this afternoon, he knew he would have to work overtime in the evening. Soon, the call was connected, and Guan Jinyu asked, what are Mr. Fu's orders? Fu Xuanyi's voice was cold, not as gentle as when he treated Wei Yuxian, and said, give up Qin's project. Yes, Guan Jinyu said cheerfully without saying anything more, I will communicate with the Qin family as soon as possible. It seems that Master Xian is really angry about what happened today. Otherwise, how could Master Xian give up such a good project? However, Ms. Qin deserves what she deserves. If Miss Qin doesn't do any tricks and happens to be tricked by Madam, then there is still a need for cooperation in this project. Without Fu's support, it would have been difficult for the Qin family to start this project, and it could basically be said to have been abandoned. Spending a lot of money on beauty, Master Xian is so generous. Here, Fu Xuanyi said again, in the future, there is no need to cooperate. Guan Jinyu was stunned for a moment, then quickly came to his senses and said yes. You know, the Qin family is also quite a wealthy family in Kyoto. Although there is still a big gap compared to the Fu family, it is still among the best. Mr. Fu said that if we don't cooperate, we won't cooperate. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But the people below them just do what the people above them say, and there is no need to ask anything else. After explaining this, Fu Xuanyi hung up the phone and started working seriously. This process took several hours. When he looked up and looked at the time, it was already past 10 o'clock in the evening. He rolled his neck to relax, turned off the computer, walked out of the study, and returned to his room. The room was dark and quiet. Apparently, the person on the bed still hadn't woken up. The energy consumed in the afternoon has not recovered after sleeping for so long. I can only say that Master Xian is powerful. Fu Xuanyi did not turn on the light, walked in slowly and quietly, sat down by the bed, and after his eyes adapted to the dark environment, he could see the person on the bed clearly. He reached out and touched her face gently, then stood up and entered the bathroom. Not long after he entered the bathroom, there was finally movement from the person on the bed, and he slowly woke up. The first thing she saw was darkness. Her mind had not yet awakened, and she had no reaction when she saw the familiar bedroom. After a while, her brain turned on and she realized that she was actually in the bedroom at home. Why did she wake up and come home? Isn't she in the company? She held her waist and slowly sat up. When she heard faint movement from the bathroom, she knew what was going on. Needless to say, it must have been that man who brought her back, but I didn't expect that she would sleep so hard that she didn't even know when she would come home. And the reason why she slept so hard was because of that man. Thinking of the ridiculous things that happened this afternoon, Wei Yuxian blushed. She endured the pain in her back, picked up the quilt, and covered her face. This was the first time for her to do such a ridiculous thing in broad daylight. In the past, even if Fu Xuanyi wanted it, she would insist on doing it at night, but today's situation is special. Doing something like that during the day makes people even more embarrassed. Moreover, it was still in Fu Xuanyi's office. Although it was in a small room with good sound insulation, he still felt twice as shy. From now on, she will never question Fu Xuanyi's love for her again. Because Fu Xuanyi told her that he loved her many times. He also told her that she would be the only one in this life. Not only that, this man also forced himself to say many words of like and love. All in all, this afternoon was very ridiculous. Just when she was in a daze, the movement in the bathroom disappeared. Not long after, Fu Xuanyi walked out of the bathroom. With sharp eyes, he noticed that the person on the bed had woken up, sitting on the bed, covering his face with the quilt, feeling shy. He turned on the light, and instantly, the dark room became brighter, but the light was warm yellow and would not hurt the eyes. He considered that Wei Yuxian had just woken up and had been in a dark environment, so he turned on a warm yellow light. Wei Yuxian looked in the direction of the man. At this moment, the man only had a large bath towel tied around his waist, and his upper body was naked. Smooth muscle lines, strong and powerful muscles, so good-looking, full of sexual tension. Wei Yuxian was stunned for a moment. When the man walked up to her, she came to her senses and quickly lowered her head. The man chuckled, reached over, and raised her head so that she looked at him. How could Wei Yuxian have the nerve to stare at his body? Although it was very beautiful, she was also very shy. She quickly closed her eyes, as if she didn't want to see anything wrong with her. The smile on the man's lips became more obvious and he said, "Open your eyes." Wei Yuxian quickly shook her head, saying no, and said, "Hurry up and put on your pajamas." Fu Xuanyi had no choice but to get up and put on his pajamas. Now, Wei Yuxian opened her eyes without him having to speak. But her eyes were still full of embarrassment because of what happened this afternoon. Fu Xuanyi hugged her, lowered his head to kiss the tip of her red ears, and asked, "My dear, do you know now how much I love you?" Wei Yuxian's heart beat rapidly, and she nodded and said yet in a low voice. Will you still disbelieve me in the future? Wei Yuxian quickly shook her head and said, never again. Fu Xuanyi was satisfied. Although he had heard these answers many times this afternoon, he still felt happy when he heard them again now. He raised the corner of his mouth slightly and said, but Guiguai's reaction today also shows that Guiguai has me in his heart, right? Wei Yuxian didn't nod or shake her head, she was extremely shy. Fu Xuanyi seduced her, speak out, say what's in your heart. Wei Yuxian took a deep breath, and in the man's arms, she said in a voice as small as a mosquito, with you. It's all you. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding.